Hey everyone, welcome back to Optimize Evony. Today I wanted to do a video that I've been talking about for a couple weeks. I did finally hit 1,000 subscribers, thanks to everyone who has subscribed. And as I mentioned, I will be doing a video on one of the most interesting concepts in Evony right now, and one of the ways that smaller coiner players are being able to kind of compete with these massive whale coining account. And I'm sure most of you guys know what that is. That is kind of the T1 trap. And I would actually go one step further. I wouldn't call it necessarily a trap. I would say it's kind of just a new way to play the game. For those of you who have been around for a while, you'll see that there's kind of various different play styles that have come for through like multiple years of playing. There was a time where T1 Siege was super powerful. There was a time where, you know, stronger troops or higher level troops were powerful. But really, the most important thing right now on defense is actually T1s. And I'll explain how exactly to set up your keep with T1s and why it actually works. Because it is a little bit, it does take a little bit of finesse there. But the main kind of component to T1s is you want to have a lot of them. You want to have a ton of T1s. But I would specifically only do a lot of T1s of certain types. And so for a T1 trap, you basically have two different options. You can either go T1 mount, which I would say is probably the most popular choice of a T1 kind of trap account, or you can go T1 ground. Um, and there's different reasons why you might choose one over the other. Let's just go and look at T1 ground and what it costs to to train them. It's all food for T1 ground, so you don't have to worry about any of the other resources. If you have a lot of food, it might be something that you can do. But I would actually recommend T1 mounts. And the reason why you would want to do T1 mounts is T1 mounts protect against a ground solo. Ground solos are incredibly powerful right now. Ground solos or even like a small ground rally, it'll protect against. And I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen crazy, crazy reports of people who have, like 2000% ground buffs, and they're able to take down a, 2 billion keep that's well built, uh, with, that has full mounts and stuff like that. And it's just absurd, right? Like there was a time where ground was actually, it was powerful, but it was very easy to counter. Like if you basically, even a ground rally, if you got like a single ground or a single mount march into that keep, you were pretty much able to dispel it if the keep was still well built and there were other lanes and stuff like that. But now ground rallies are super powerful and ground solos are super powerful. I know we have some people on my server who like to do SVS traps, and they work a lot worse now. Now that ground is so powerful, because basically people will reign with ground and archers, but if the ground and archers aren't strong enough, and these are not very good accounts, so they're maybe like 12 million reigns total, 11 million reigns total. Basically, one of those big coiners can come along with a ground solo and kill the entire thing, even though everyone in the trap has good buffs. They've done their research there. It's not like these are like just weak accounts throwing random marches in here. It's well thought out. But if you don't have enough mounts in there, it still is very, very easy for that to for a a big ground solo to kind of swipe through there. So how do you protect yourself from there? I would say the answer is T1 mounts. and building a lot of T1 mounts. When I say a lot, I mean definitely over 50 million. Probably, I would say the kind of sweet spot is like 200 million is where I think most people should try and get to avoid being able to be kind of zeroed by a solo. Um, but for I understand that some people are not going to be able to hit that. So I still think 100 million is going to do a good enough job. It's not going to be quite as good as 200 million, but because people will eventually whittle through those layers and you'll be able to die. But I think 100 to 200 million is kind of where you want to be. I think for bigger players, there is a reason to increase that. Uh, you can see that I have more than that. We'll see, how I feel about that. But I know some players have like a billion T1 mounts, and essentially, my thought process on why you would do that is the way that the rally dynamics work is that you basically rally archer or siege typically first, and then kind of whittle down the targeted troops until you're able to do a mount and then a ground clear, depending on how big the person is. But what a bunch of T1 mounts actually does is it doesn't allow that archer rally to go through all of your mounts quite as quickly, and it allows some of your other troops to stay alive longer. So where a decent sized rally might have taken out all of your mounts and a lot of your archers before, it'll stop with most of your mounts, and then most of your archers will still be there. So it is very powerful and able to in order to keep you surviving longer. And so I do think that no matter what size of a player you are, T1s have a huge part of your game. So let's kind of look at the stats here. It's not super important, but kind of the main things are you kind of see what these stats are around 1,000. It's not super big here for any of these stats. When you compare those to, let's just compare them to a T14, just because I don't have T15s. I mean, I can look at them, but I mean, it's like about 20 times smaller, maybe a little bit more than 20 times smaller. And this is 14 tiers up. So you can see that this scales up quite a bit. So the base stats of the higher tiers are significantly stronger, but what you do get a benefit of for T1s is that they're very cheap to make. You can see they're only 80 food and 80 wood a piece to make. So you can make a ton of them. They don't take as much speeds to make a lot of them. They still do run through a ton of speeds if you're building in mass. But it basically is going to allow you to survive longer. And so I think especially if you're a smaller player but you still want to join in rallies, you still want to survive a little bit longer, this is super important. So that's only one part of the ball game, though. You can build all of these T1 mounts, but if you don't set up your defense the correct way, it's not really going to be very effective for you. So if you just build, 100 million, 200 million T1 mounts, it will help. Absolutely, it'll help. But people will be able to get through those layers if you don't have your defense set up correctly. And when I when I say correctly, let me pull up my defense general just as a reference. I'm not completely set up for T1 mounts, but I have done a little bit of work on T1 mounts, and so basically we'll take a look at some of the gear here. Um, Basically, what you want to do for T1 mounts is you want to essentially use flat refines. So if you guys aren't familiar with flat refines, these are basically the number refines. You can see that there's percentage refines and then there's number refines. And the number refines are called flat refines because they basically scale equally for all the tiers. They're affecting those base stats. They're not, it's not a percentage of those base stats. And so um, if you remember when we were looking at the T1 mounts before, the mount troop HP was around like 1600 if I remember correctly. So if you look at like a single gear of refines, you can essentially get like 400% of your base stats improvement on this. And so flat refines are way more effective for lower tier troops because they uh, because they're based on those base stats. And so like I said, these ones are actually even stronger than the base stats of the T1 mounts. But if you're looking at like the T14 mounts, this is a very small percent of that of that base stat. You know, I think it was like 38,000 or something was the base stat for T14. So this is a really, really small percent of that. And so I would really not recommend using flat refines for high level troops. But for low level troops, and in particular T1s, you really want to focus on these flats. And that basically, the reason why you're doing that is because you're essentially bringing these T1 mounts, again, we'll see it's 1652 HP here, and that's going to bring it up to, it's going to essentially um, make the T1 mounts to be roughly equivalent to, I mean, okay, let's say each refine can be about like 1800, 1900. So if we just do like 1800, that's 360, 720 plus the base one. Uh, that's like that's essentially bringing it up to like T7s. So that's essentially making your T1 mounts to have the survivability of a T7. So it costs you the amount of a T1 to make, but when you're on defense, it acts like a T7 mount. And then, you know, obviously your T7s will also jump up by, you know, that amount. It'll make your higher tier troops weaker than if you had percentage refines, but most of your high level amounts are going to die anyways to an archer rally. I mean, archer rallies are just incredibly powerful these days, and so it's more about protecting the rest of your troops and not being able to be zeroed. That's what you're using these T1s for. So you're essentially increasing the capabilities of your T1s, and that is going to allow you to survive longer. It's essentially related to the battle dynamics. For those of you who aren't familiar, Evony battles happen in rounds. Basically, each troop type that is able to fight in a round will essentially take a shot or will attack, and then the round is over. The remaining troops will stay on the battlefield, and it'll keep going. Similar to pretty much any other attacking PvP kind of style thing. But the benefit of having all these T1 mounts here is that each each troop on the attack is still only able to attack so much in a in an attack. And so it just takes so much time to get through all of these T1 layers. And so that gives your other troops, your ground troops, your archer troops, your siege troops time to actually kill the other troops because they're not getting targeted, they're not getting attacked quite as much, but they're still able to attack the other troops. And so it just makes it a lot easier for you to survive. It'll whittle down your layers, but it'll keep the your kind of higher troops alive of the non-targeted variety. And so that's kind of where this is helping. I will actually do a video on my thoughts on how to actually defeat a T1 trap. Uh, and it'll be very different based on kind of the size and stuff like that. But I'll give my thoughts on how to defeat a T1 trap in a different video. Um, there's already enough information in this one. I'll do a follow-up video for that. But yeah, this is kind of an introduction to T1s. The other thing is, because you do want those flat refines, you also want to use your use the type gear, because this type gear also gives you some flat refines as well. So it's less important. It's okay uh, if you don't do that, but it will give you a little bit more survivability as well. Um, and the other thing that I do want to point out is it, especially with defense, there are trade-offs to be made here, because the Civ gear has a max percentage refine of 30%. So you can see I actually got really lucky with one of my refines, got it to a flat or a full 30%. But the flat refines on Civ gear remain the same as an Ares gear or an Arche gear. And so you really have to understand kind of the trade-offs on whether you want to go full kind of flat refines for your kind of T1 troops, or if you want to be able to essentially use kind of a mix of both, um, or for certain things do like for example, I would really not recommend using flats for like the attack values, especially if you're like rally size. Using the percentages are just going to be so much more beneficial to you, because you're going to have the higher tier troops and stuff like that, and it's going to help you be able to survive. But yeah, that's kind of the last thing that I want to talk about with that. What do you guys think about T1 traps? I know it's very much so a new part of the game. Some people have been doing it for a little while. It does, in my opinion, kind of make some battlefields a little bit annoying, because if you're like me and you have an alliance where there's a couple big players and then a lot of smaller players, where the smaller players get kind of taken out pretty early, it makes it a little bit harder for you to be able to score points by soloing and getting those decent sized clears. But I do think ultimately it is a way to work around the just crazy offensive buffs that Evony has released. It's a way of kind of balancing back a little bit in terms of defense. You can still lose in the power differential, but at least you're not typically going to get wiped out, unless you are already going to get wiped out. You are already like very, very overpowered. So that's kind of my thoughts on T1s. Let me know what you guys think. And again, thanks for all the subscribers. Let me know what else you want to see, and I'll see you in the next video.